Good morning. I have the pleasure of introducing you to Fran Palazzolo from Acknowledge Education, and she is going to present to you this morning on internet pornography use disorder in search of a non-pathologizing description of an evolving clinical issue. Please welcome Fran.
Okay. Hello. So thank you for coming, everyone. Good morning. My name's Francesca. I'm a counsellor, lecturer and vocational researcher, and I'm going to be reading off my phone, so apologies. My special focus is on clinical and social issues surrounding internet pornography use. Today I'll be presenting findings from two publications, a qualitative study I conducted in 2020 and a follow-up article published in 2023. Along with some insights from recent literature and academic discourse. However, today's topic is internet pornography use disorder, an evolving clinical issue, how we can conceptualise and address it as therapists without pathologising human sexuality. Oh, hang on. Okay. So I'd just like to begin by providing some context to my 2020 study. In 2018, the World Health Organization included a classification for compulsive sexual behaviour disorder, or CSBD, in the updated ICD-11, which is the International Classification of Diseases Manual. So this was a significant move as it acknowledged a pattern of repetitive and compulsive sexual behaviours that persist despite negative consequences. The term sexual addiction, which is what colloquially we may call it, or it's used, was intentionally avoided. The concept is still contentious, both clinically and culturally today. However, since the inclusion of CSBD in the ICD-11, early reports showed that about 80% of those presenting with CSBD were doing so because of internet pornography. So what appears to have driven this... Is that not showing? Oh, there it is. What appears to have driven this is the increase in internet pornography use, made ubiquitous by Cooper's AAA engine, access, affordability and anonymity. So in 1998, which is a long time ago, Al Cooper published a paper called, hang on, let me go back. Sexuality and the Internet Surfing into the New Millennium. And in it, he determined that this, what he called AAA engine access, which is ease of access to content, affordability. So back in those days, you still had to pay to access content. These days, it's mostly like a YouTube model where it's advertising funded, and the anonymity made what he proposed seems to have happened. So it seems virtually unlimited access to explicit content has fundamentally altered how people engage with sexuality, and for some it's become problematic. So I did a literature review as part of my study, and obviously reflecting the growing concern, there was an increase in literature on internet pornography, but most of the studies were quantitative. Fewer captured the lived experience of users who considered their internet pornography use a problem. So that was the motivation between my 2020 study, to give voice to those users. And in 2023, I extended this research. I felt that I had more to say that wasn't really appropriate for that study. So I extended that research to propose a more clinically grounded, non-pathologizing framework for what we might call internet pornography use disorder. So I'm just going to go through that 2020 study. So it was a qualitative study. I took a phenomenological approach. Thematic analysis was used, and it was an online anonymous survey, self-selected. Participants were able to self-select, and 105 participants in total completed part of the survey, and 53 completed the entire survey. And it was consisted of 3 demographic type screening questions and 17 open-ended questions asking users about their pornography use, when they first accessed pornography, how they felt about it, how it impacted their lives, and things like that. And it was open. There was no limit to the text, so participants could write as little or as much as they wanted in the fields. So thematic analysis revealed 3 key areas of impact: mental health and well-being, intimacy and relationships, and experiences of dependency. And within that, there were a number of sub-themes, and I'll go through them in a minute. So just an overview. So with the theme 1, mental health and well-being, users reported symptoms of anxiety, depression, brain fog, low motivation and shame. These effects spilled over into their daily lives, undermining their productivity and relationships. And that segues into theme 2, intimacy and relationships. So many participants reported avoiding real-life intimacy, experiencing feelings of alienation or self-imposed isolation, developing distorted views of women. Some noted that their use of porn made them more anxious and less connected to others generally. And in the third theme, experience of dependency, participants described classic addiction-like symptoms, difficulty stopping, cravings when attempting to stop, mood disruptions caused by withdrawal type symptoms, but also using pornography to improve their mood or to manage mood, using porn to self-soothe, continuing to use despite negative consequences. They also reported physical symptoms like erectile dysfunction and loss of arousal with real-life partners. So just as it was a qualitative study, I pulled out some key quotes to describe each of the sub-themes. So I'm just going to go through some of these. So it has caused me to be lonely, depressed, decrease my motivation to try and do things I care about or that require some willpower. It has contributed to my social anxiety. I shouldn't have used such a pale font. I can hardly read that. Thinking and condition, one person wrote, "I love studying, but porn has interrupted my ability to focus on lengthy tasks, including reading and writing." So sleep and motivation, I'm almost certain that it has contributed to my lack of energy and motivation. And this theme, guilt, shame and self-worth, a lot of participants wrote some really, I feel, heartbreaking, and I was really touched by some of the vulnerability that obviously they were able, because it was anonymous, they were able to, I think, speak authentically. I sensed that in reading through all the answers, which is quite moving. But the one person wrote, "I feel like a broken, corrupted person." And another person wrote, "I look back at some of the things I would search for in disgust now that I have quit." And the second theme, intimacy and relationship effects. Participants reported lack of intimacy and engagement in real-life relationships across the board. One person wrote, "I have chosen the ease of porn over trying to find a new partner," which I think says a lot. The second sub-theme of alienation, porn surfing has stopped me from participating in life in every way. I don't socialise, I don't celebrate, I don't participate. And it also affected their expectations and their perception of women negatively. One person wrote, "It made me a pathetic and shy loner who saw women largely as sex objects while at the same time being scared of them in real life." And so on to the next theme, experience of, it's counting down good, dependency. The participants reported feelings that we might hear substance use clients say. So one person wrote, I realised it was a habit and eventually that it had a negative impact on my life and possibly on my mood. Still, I struggle to stay away from it. And then we have symptoms of tolerance, or which presents more as escalation in terms of time spent accessing and using internet pornography, and also in terms of escalation to more extreme types of content. And at first I watched relatively soft porn, and as years passed by, I moved towards more brutal and degrading kinds of porn. And physical symptoms, so the most reported symptom was erectile dysfunction in those that reported problematic use. One person wrote, I couldn't get an erection with women. I found it attractive, and even when I did, it didn't last long at all. Other physical symptoms reported were physical damage from excess use, and continuing to use despite of that. Ease of gratification. So pornography was a way to escape reality and feel good, and I was thinking it was harmless. And then we have prioritising porn or salience. So mainly it takes time away from me. Watching porn takes away study time, work time, time with friends, rest time, etc. And the last sub-theme was general negative life outcomes. And I think one person put it quite well by saying, I'm not doing well in life. I hardly have sex. I love fapping, which is masturbating to internet porn. I've become an underachiever and have achieved nothing worthwhile. I entertain too much. I don't sow but wish to reap a huge crop. So in summary, my study aimed to explore the lived experience of users of internet pornography, and the main findings were that repeated and prolonged internet pornography use caused participants significant personal suffering, social impairment, and similar to those of substance disordered people. Now, just an update, in preparing for this presentation, I did another sort of mini literature review of just qualitative studies. Since I did my 2020 study, there's been a few more. And I just did a very quick thematic analysis of the themes, and you'll see, I won't go through them because I can't read that from here, but you'll see some of the common themes occurring. So I thought that's interesting, and that may be something I'll look into later. So for my next paper, building on the findings, my 2023 paper proposes internet pornography use disorder as a term to be intended to be descriptive, not moralising. It aligns with behavioural addiction models and shares features similar to substance use disorders like impaired control, social impairment, risky use, etc. And in this paper, do we need a label? As a counsellor, I don't really care too much about labels, but sometimes a framework is helpful. And there has also been in the literature, if you've done any research, quite a few studies on perceived addiction to internet pornography and moral incongruence as factors, which I believe kind of muddy the waters. And perhaps the dialogue around perceived addiction invalidates the lived experiences of internet pornography users who report significant harm. So my aim is to find balance. We don't want to pathologise normal sex-seeking behaviours. We don't want to marginalise or judge people. However, we must acknowledge the real-life harms of internet-enabled sex problems. So in this, I might just skip ahead. So in this paper, I just did a little bit more research. quite a few neuroscience studies and reviews have come out showing that there are neurological changes involved which mimic substance use disorder. And excuse me, I'm going back this way. I also compared the ICD-11 description of compulsive sexual behaviour disorder and compared it with the DSM criteria for substance use disorders. So the DSM groups symptoms into impaired control, social impairment, risky use and pharmacological criteria. And through these two comparisons and the results of my study, I propose a classification for IP use disorder with using similar criteria as substance use disorders, focusing on impaired control, social impairment and risky use. So this is what I've come up with as a possible framework. So loss of control, difficulty stopping use despite harmful consequences, escalation or tolerance, prioritisation of porn or salience, negative mental or physical health consequences, negative interpersonal problems, and antisocial impacts. That reflects that there are some cases where internet pornography use moves from through that process of escalation into not just extreme content which is legal, but also illegal content. I also explored some implications for treatment. There is definitely a need for more research in treatment for internet pornography use disorder, but so far therapeutic approaches show that cognitive behaviour therapy and group therapy are effective, and as well as emerging approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness-based relapse prevention, and interestingly, some pharmacotherapy studies show promise, particularly naltrexone. So integrated approaches, and this is my clinical experience. I've worked with, as an AOD counsellor, I've worked with substance use clients. I've also worked with clients who present with sexual addiction or compulsive sexual behaviour disorder or internet pornography use, and I find an integrative approach works best. So combining individual psychotherapy, group therapy such as a 12-step group like SA or even something like Smart Recovery, but I think the 12-step programs seem to be more suited to my clients, and pharmacotherapy may offer a comprehensive treatment. However, there is need for further research. We need more studies are needed to determine what best treatment combinations, other modalities such as EMDR show potential, and the effectiveness of various pharmacotherapies. So there's further questions that sort of need to be asked. There's a lot of space for research in this area. What about the content? What part does that play? The rise in child sexual abuse material, is it related to the phenomenon of escalation? That's a theory that needs, or a hypothesis that needs to be explored. What are the legal implications? Moral, ethical and spiritual aspects? Do we need to dispose of the invalidating term perceived addiction when discussing internet pornography use? That's my opinion. How much porn is too much? Is there a safe level of use? Just like with alcohol, we talk about safer levels of alcohol consumption. The role of comorbidity, and just a broader conversation. So to wrap up, internet pornography use disorder is a real complex phenomenon that deserves clinical recognition, not stigma. And as AOD workers and counsellors, we can work with clients who present with internet pornography use symptoms the same way we work with substance use clients, by listening to users' lived experiences, aligning with behavioural science and refining our diagnostic frameworks. We can offer care that's effective, compassionate and grounded in reality. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Fran. That was fascinating. I'm sure there's a multitude of questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. There's a really significant rate of erectile dysfunction in the 18 to 25-year-old demographic, like with a rise, more than in any other age group, which is interesting because in other age groups, possibly hypertension plays a role. That's really unlikely in an 18 to 25-year-old demographic. Do you think that internet porn use disorder might contribute to this statistic?
Yes, there have been quite a few studies. In fact, this one that Parker et al. Did a review in 2016 specifically on mentioning that, and they propose that the rise in internet pornography use, erectile dysfunction issues is directly related to the increase in pornography use. And in my study, I asked the question, how old were you when you first started viewing internet pornography? Now, of all the participants that answered that question, most of the participants were about in their 30s. However, when I asked the question, how old were you when you first started to view porn, the average was about 14.9 years old. But that's because one participant was 40 when he first viewed internet pornography use in the context of a divorce. So if taking him out, that person out, the average age of first viewing was about 12, I think it was about 12, which is quite young. So as you know, with templates, the arousal template, which is a Patrick Kahn's concept, is set at such a young age, then if you think about it, if someone has been viewing internet pornography use and it becomes problematic from when they're about 12, and then when they get to 30, that's almost 2 decades. So that could account for that, I think.
Thanks, Fran.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I've been wanting to hear more about the breadth of addictions and how us who represent AOD services might broaden our perspectives and thinking of comorbidities. What recommendations or thoughts would you have that you'd like to share with traditional AOD service providers about other addictive behaviours?
I think there's definitely scope for to broaden the category. I worked in Victoria as an AOD counsellor, and in the intake tool, they do kind of ask about gambling, and they sort of ask about other behavioural addictions, but we have it's only if they have another comorbidity like alcohol or some other substance use disorder that they are eligible for the service. So I think broadening the scope in terms of if they have gambling, we refer them to our gambling. We used to refer them to our gambling counsellor, but I think there is scope to broaden the criteria to include all behavioural addictions, because the neuroscience clearly shows that the mechanisms are very similar, and the psychosocial effects are also very similar. So I can't see why we can't work with them in a mainstream AOD service.
Thanks, Fran.
Hi, Fran. Thanks. That was an excellent presentation and fascinating. I don't know if you have looked at this yourself or if you know if there's any research relating to it, but I'm wondering if there's differences between those who view pornography versus those who engage with maybe sort of like the live chats and, paying money and actually actively engaging with people who are providing online content.
Yes, it depends on the research. That's something that probably needs to be looked into in more depth as well in terms of the type of behaviour, but it all gets lumped into, it gets called things like compulsive online sexual behaviours. So it just gets called internet pornography use. Like there's no classification between. There's not as much research on the specific types of engagement with with the different activities that one can use in terms of the internet for sex-related behaviours. When I talk about internet pornography use, I kind of lump them all in together. However, there are some researchers would be quite specific because of the way that the internet works, like the algorithms, the fact that you can have 100 tabs open, how that affects the brain has a specific impact. So, but I think it's all kind of related. I know I have clients that just view porn. I have clients that view porn and also webcam, and also then graduate to trying to meet sex workers and also other activities offline. So it kind of it depends on the individual how it plays out, I think. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Fran. I've got a very cheeky question. I work with men at the other end of this. So I work in the correctional system with men who've committed very serious sexual offences, and we're starting to see this trajectory from the 12-year-old. I'm wondering whether you are planning on investigating the characteristics of the people who who develop this kind of addiction, and then all of these characteristic social problems, so that we've got early intervention points.
I think there's definitely more room for education and awareness around the long-term impacts of engaging in internet pornography use sort of constricted. So obviously these days everyone has a mobile phone. You can access child sexual abuse material within a few clicks, even unintentionally. So it's my suspicion, my hypothesis, that there are men that are in the justice system for, downloading child sexual abuse material, engaging in that stuff but they may not fit your definition of a classic pedophile. It may not be their natural orientation. So that's something I've done a little bit of research in, but it's quite a broad area and one that I would like to research more in. But I definitely think there needs to be some awareness of this in terms of, especially at the younger age, so that parents and educators understand that it's not, it can be a natural thing for young men to be curious, but there are dangers involved.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a fascinating presentation. I'm just kind of dovetailing from that question. I'm keen to hear the trajectory of men who are kind of accessing social influencers like Andrew Tate versus pop-up kind of advertising, and what the link is to them then accessing really violent porn that kind of degrades women versus your everyday porn, whatever that might look like.
I don't. That's an interesting question. That's an area that I haven't really looked into in terms of the content and how it's accessed. I do know that, say for example, Pornhub, which isn't even the most popular site, but it's the only one that publishes stats every year. It publishes a 2020, whatever the year is, year in review. And there's about two or three, I think, for example, in 2022, they had 42 billion visits. So the way that works is similar to YouTube in that it's all user-generated content, and an algorithm kind of suggests different videos to you. And there's a possibility that some may just stumble onto videos that they may not necessarily search for. And that, I think that process can lead to the more extreme content. I think what happens is, as tolerance builds, similar with substance use, they find themselves that, they're just watching regular sex. They may just start off looking up boobs, which is what all boys would do as soon as they get a mobile phone. It's understandable, but through the process, and this takes like years, it's not just an instant process. They find that just viewing regular sex becomes sort of boring, so then they either click onto something that they think, oh, this is interesting, or they may start searching for something that they feel gives them that level of excitement. For example, when I was working this is in 2015, or 16, I was working at a Headspace as a youth access clinician at the time, and we had a young man present. He was 16 and he had developed a foot fetish through internet pornography, and he felt that he was really disturbed by that, and it was affecting his relationships and his ability to talk to girls at school and things like that. So I think it's a combination. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fran. We've run out of time, but I imagine we could talk to Fran all day. So can we please thank Fran for her incredible presentation?